Welcome to the first asynchronous video lesson for Research in Daily Life 1. I hope that you will learn a lot after watching this video. Today, we are going to talk about the moral duties and ethical principles in research. What are the things that you have to consider? And what are the things that you have to avoid in doing your research? These are our target competencies for this lesson. First is to share your research experiences and knowledge. Second is to explain the importance of research in daily life. And describe characteristics, processes, and ethics of research. Particularly in this lesson, we will focus on ethics of research. In 2006, Silverman stated the moral duties in conducting a research. This is adopted by the Council for International Organization of Medical Sciences and the World Health Organization. The first moral duty is beneficence. Beneficence means to seek do good rather than to inflict harm. Of course, it is important that when we are doing our research, it is beneficial. It will bring good to the community, to the people, to the environment, and it will not cause harm to any of those mentioned sectors of our society. There are two principles under beneficence. The first one is beneficence itself, which means we must maximize the benefit. In doing a research, dapat palagi nating makikita ano ba yung maitutulong nito at dapat i-emphasize natin iyan, maitutulong niya sa community. At sino-sinong members ng community yung makikinabang doon sa study natin. Again, we do research to improve the life of people, to find out the errors in the process, and help correct those errors. So again, benefit is important. It also requires that the risk of the research to be reasonable in the light of the expected benefits. Of course, there are no 100% risk-proof research or process. There are always possible sources of mistakes, possible sources of harm. However, we must make sure that the benefits outweigh the risk. Therefore, another important thing in doing your research is to make sure to have a good design for your study, good set of processes, good set of steps and methods in your research. Because if you plan your process properly, you will see there what could be the source of mistake in this plan, and we can eliminate that so that it will not bring harm to the researchers and to the subjects as well. Kapag ang disenyo ng research natin ay maraming mali, ito ay maaari magdulot ng maraming kapahamakan, hindi lang sa mga subjects ng study, kundi sa researchers mismo. And again, in beneficence, we have to make sure that the risk is minimized and the benefits are maximized. Kailangan din that investigators are competent to conduct the research and safeguard the welfare of the research subjects. So dapat sapat lang sa kakayanan ninyo yung research na gagawin nyo. Okay? For example, gusto nyo gumawa ng device na magme-measure ng health ng person. Pero wala kang sapat na kakayanan para gawin yon. So, how will you be able to execute a good research design or a good research method kung hindi sapat yung kakayanan mo? Okay, for example, another example, a lot of students would like to study about mental health. Okay? And then, pag tinanong sila, paano mo gustong i-explore yung mental health? Sabi nila, sir, i-interviewin po namin yung mga taong may depression, may anxiety, kung bakit sila may depression at bakit sila may anxiety. Una sa lahat, pag tinalakay ang mental health or nagtanong ang isang tao sa isa pang tao tungkol sa mental health, una, dapat meron siyang sapat na kakayanan na i-handle yung sitwasyon. Kaya, ang mga research about mental health kadalasan ay ginagawa ng mga eksperto, di ba, mga psychologist, psychiatrist, mga doktor na nag-specialize dun sa field na yun. Kasi, what if during the process, biglang matrigger ng tanong mo yung kausap mo na participant of your study? Okay? What if your questions trigger some trauma or emotions in them na hindi mo alam kung paano mo i-address? So, that will cause harm to the subject that you are interviewing or that are undergoing the process of your research. And that may cause harm, therefore violates beneficence. Pangalawa, another example. Ngayon, nagkakanda kayo ng research sa panahon ng pandemya. Okay? At isa sa mga iniiwasan natin ay magkaroon kayo ng sakit ng COVID-19. So when we check your process, dapat siguraduhin namin na hindi kayo masyadong ma-expose sa mga tao at hindi kayo ma-expose sa mga taong lalo-lalo na sa mga taong may COVID-19. For example, gusto mo pag-aralan ano yung karanasan ng mga taong may COVID-19 and you would like to interview them and you will interview them face-to-face. Okay? Kapag ginawa mo yon, malaking chance na mahawa ka ng sakit. So again, in this process, hindi lang dapat yung subject yung napoprotektahan or nakikinabang. Even the researchers, napoprotektahan din siya at nakikinabang din siya sa proseso. If that happens na nag-acquire ka ng sakit sa paggawa ng research, that violates beneficence. Okay? Another principle under beneficence is non-maleficence. Okay? Siguro you are familiar with Maleficent, one of the villains in a fairy tale. Okay? Maleficent means bad. Non-maleficence means the removal of something bad or avoiding harm. So in the research, you do no harm. No, you cannot deliberately inflict harm or danger to your subject. For example, narinig mo na yung ivermectin ay pwedeng gamot sa COVID-19. Usap-usapan yan sa internet. Tapos may mga study rin na nagsasabi na or may mga reports din na nagsasabi na hindi siya pwedeng gamiting gamot kasi this is what we call a remedy for parasite living in the body of animals at hindi siya intended for curing COVID-19. Now, you find this conflict, you find this problem, and you would like to settle kung ano ba ang totoo. And because of that, you would like to conduct a research. So, paano mo ginawa? Ang ginawa, pinainom ng ivermectin yung mga participants mo. That is a violation of non-maleficence, therefore a violation of beneficence. Kasi, hindi natin sigurado ano yung mga effects ng gamot na yun sa tao, possible side effects nun sa tao kasi pang animal yung gamot na yun, pang hayop yung gamot na yun. So that is non-maleficence. You are harming the person instead of giving them benefits in conducting your research. Okay? Another is, for example, gusto mong malaman kung yung iyong ointment ay nakakagaling ba ng sugat. So in your process, ang gagawin mo, susugatan mo yung isang participant at i-apply yung ointment. So that's a violation of maleficence. Why? Because sinugatan mo siya. You're exposed him to harm just to test kung mag-work ba yung iyong ointment na na-develop or nagawa. So that's non-maleficence, no? That's why in research, there are very important process when we are doing testing in living things, especially in human beings. Diba kaya nga sa testing, kadalasan sinisimulan muna natin sa mga microbes, microorganisms, bago tayo magte-test sa invertebrates, bago tayo magte-test sa mammals, bago tayo mag-test sa humans. Kailangan maraming stages muna siyang pinagdaanan. Yung human testing, yun na yung pinaka-ultimate at bago umabot doon, dapat na-check na yung sa iba't ibang level. Diba, if you watch All of Us Are Dead, the Korean series, no? They yung testing na nangyari from animal, tapos nakagat yung tao, tapos that is a violation of non-maleficence. Kasi even though they don't know the effect yet of that process, ginawa na agad nila sa tao. And instead of giving benefits, the intended benefit of it was transformed into harm or danger. So remember, if you do research, make sure to highlight the benefits, weigh the risks of your study, design it properly so that errors will be avoided. You are skilled enough to do your research process so that you will not be able to inflict harm to your respondents. Another moral duty is veracity or avoidance of deceptions. In your research, you must not tell lies. How will you be able to observe veracity? Veracity comes from the Latin word veritas, which means truth, and it requires us to tell the truth based on gathered facts and evidence. So you need to do experiments, you need to conduct surveys, you need to perform series of interviews and different means of data collection. And all those data that you have to collect, that you have collected, must undergo analysis and interpretation. And the results that you will publish must be based on those results that you gathered. You cannot manipulate the result. Hindi mo pwedeng baguhin. Kapag sinabi niya no, you have to reflect that what she said or he said is no. Kapag lumabas sa experiment na failed yung hypothesis, you have to present in your results that the hypothesis failed. Okay, so we have to be truthful in the result of our studies because it is always based on facts and evidence. Iwas na tayo sa fake news kasi lalo na sa panahon na to, no, ang buhay natin ay napapaligiran ng fake news at maraming tao ang naloloko at basta-basta naniniwala sa fake news. So ang panglaban natin sa fake news is research, truth, facts, evidence. Palaging may basihan, palaging may pinagkuhanan ng impormasyon at hindi basta-basta haka-haka lamang or kwento-kwento lang ng kung sino. Second is you have to keep promises. For example, if you say to a respondent that you will help them, say you went to a community and you found out that their life is so depressing that they do not have, it's hard for them to find source of food, source of work, and then you promise that you will help them, you will connect them to some agencies or some organizations that will address their problem. You have to keep that promise. Okay? Another is if you interviewed a person and you found out that he or she may be suffering with a mental health problem, sinabi mo, sige, tutulungan kitang makahanap ng doctor or association na tutulong sa iyo. You must be able to carry out that promise back because if you fail to do so, you are deceiving the respondents. Another is avoidance of error in data collection and content. Kasi kapag may mali sa proseso, mali ang resulta. Kapag mali ang inyong analysis and interpretation, mali yung magiging conclusion ng inyong study. Kaya dapat sisiguraduhin natin na lahat ng steps na susundan natin ay tama at hindi magkakos ng mistake or deception or error in the end. Because if there's error in your results, in your conclusion, then your research is not truthful anymore. Kaya, peer review yung mga researches para ma-check kung gaano ka totoo or gaano ka panipaniwala yung findings ng study na yun. And lastly, in observing truth, you must avoid conducting plagiarism. No? Let us practice intellectual honesty. If the idea is not your own, you have to give credit to where the idea came from. So, like I have said, plagiarism is a violation of veracity because you are claiming something that is not yours. So, that is deceiving. That is deception of your audience or of your readers. So, how is plagiarism happening? First, if you post another's work as your own, diba? Pinagawa mo sa iba, pina-research mo sa mama mo, sa kuya mo, sa ate mo, sa best friend mo, sa jowa mo, kung may jowa ka. Okay? And then, yun yung pinasa mo. So that is plagiarism because you are not the one who originally worked on it. Misrepresentation and deception. For example, you read an idea, you heard it from someone, and then you presented it as your own. You did not even cite the original source where you read or where you heard or where you have seen that information. So if you misrepresent an information, that is plagiarism. Also, quoting without acknowledging original source, especially now in the internet that information is available to us online, we can easily copy and paste information. And by doing so, we are quoting without acknowledging the original source. There are ways in technical writing on how we can avoid this copy pasting the ideas. Another is paraphrasing without acknowledging original source. So even though you stated an information on your own way, but that information did not come from you originally, you have read it somewhere, you have watched it somewhere, then you have to cite the source. Paraphrasing that closely resembles the original in language and syntax without crediting original source. Ito pa, isa sa mga ginagawa, paraphrase, is ika-copy yung text, papalitan lang ng synonyms yung dalawang word doon, and they will consider that as paraphrasing. That is now how paraphrasing works. Or for example, ang sanabi ng article is, we should avoid doing harm. And then you translate it is to, a person should avoid doing harm. So you just change the word we to a person. So that is not considered paraphrasing. In paraphrasing, you have to restate the idea. You must keep the idea, of course, but you have to state it in your own way. There are times that you change the voice of the sentence. There are times that you change the tense of the sentence, replace some words, shorten some phrases. You may also use synonym, but simply changing the synonym is not paraphrasing. Improper citation is also plagiarism. This is an example of an unintentional plagiarism that you cited the source. However, your citation is incorrect. So that is still plagiarism. You have to give credit where credit is due. So whoever said that, you have to cite the source properly. And in our in doing research in RDL1, we will follow the APA citation style. Another is repeatedly submitting your own work. So for example, you did a research in junior high school, and then you will submit that again in senior high school without changing, without revision, without undergoing again another process of data collection. So that is self-plagiarism. Okay, that's another example of a violation to veracity. So if you have a work in the past that you believe is really something that is good and you would like to show that in your research again, then you cite yourself. Okay, you cite the work that you did in the past, but you cannot submit similar work. Okay, it must undergo revision, must undergo another processing, because what you have written in the past may have changed. It cannot be, or it may not be the same. Even your personal reflection and principle changes through time. So you have to do some changes, editing in your work for it to not be considered self-plagiarism. In relation to those moral duties, there are ethical principles in research that we have to observe. First one is respect for person. In relation to the moral duty consent, we must respect the autonomy of our participants. It requires those who are capable of deliberation about their personal choices be treated with respect for their capacity for self-determination. For example, like I have said earlier, if they don't want to sign the consent or they don't want to participate, we cannot force them. All right. Another is even though they sign a consent form, if they said they would like to stop participating, they don't want to answer a certain question because they are not comfortable or they don't want to share that information, or even at the end of the process, we're done interviewing them or we are done asking them to answer the survey, they retracted the information, then we have to respect the decision of these people because after all, the information is about them. Another is protection of persons with impaired or diminished autonomy. These are commonly minors or persons with disability or senior citizens who developmentally cannot make decisions on their own. Okay? It requires that those who are dependent or vulnerable be afforded security against abuse. That's why we seek consent of their guardians or a relative or an individual that takes care of these people. So there are times that during the process, the guardians are there to observe what is happening, or we must explain to the guardian what will happen so that these people will be protected from harm relating to the moral duty of beneficence. Okay, so that must be secured. Another ethical principle is justice. How can we achieve this? Treat each person with what is morally right and proper. If you treat a respondent in a certain way, all other respondents must be treated in the same way. Okay? They must be provided equal opportunities. They must be provided equal benefits in doing your research while you are doing your research. Give a person what is due to him. There should be an equitable distribution of burdens and benefits. For example, there's a new drug that you would like to test. And then what you did is you get poor people to be tested by that new drug. Okay? After the process, you learn that the new drug is effective. Now, the new drug is only accessible to the rich person and the poor people cannot afford that new drug anymore. So that's a violation of justice. Okay? It must be equitable. It must be accessible to everyone. Okay? That's why in many of those data collection that involves human testing, we present them the risk. The participation is voluntary. Okay, and there are some stipulated protection policy and how they will be protected or how they will be helped in the process, insurance and so on. Another example is say you would like to put a dam to answer the problem with the shortage of water. And then the water from that dam serves people in urban area like Metro Manila. So the people in Metro Manila benefits from the water that are coming from the dam. But the problem is people who are living near the dam were displaced. Diba? They were abused. Their land is taken away from them. Okay? And because of that, they are more exposed to disasters and a lot of negative impacts to them. So that is injustice in your research. Again, going back to our moral duty, we have to consider the benefits, the harm in your research. It may be benefiting a certain sector only, but harming another sector. And we have to weigh that. We have to check that the benefits outweigh the harm and everyone is receiving benefit and not only a certain sector. Lastly is vulnerability. Provisions must be made to protect the rights and welfare of vulnerable persons. So as I have said earlier, people with diminished capability must be protected in our research process. That is why we ask for consent of their guardians. So those are the moral duties and ethical principles in research. I hope you understood the lesson. And if you have any question, do not hesitate to message your research advisor to clarify or to address those concerns. Now, in your meeting log, we want you to write your insight and reflection for today's lesson. Choose only one out of the two sets of questions below. First, when you were doing your research in junior high school, how did you observe this ethical and moral conduct? And why is it important to observe these? The second question that you may choose, have you ever violated any of this ethical and moral conduct? How? And what will you do to avoid committing such violations in the future? Again, please put your answers in your meeting log, and next meeting, we will have a very short quiz, a very short drill, just to check how much you understood the lesson for today. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope that you learned a lot, and I will see you again next meeting. Bye!